Hello and welcome to the Doctors Who Read Stuff. We're covering Dune by Frank Herbert. And tonight we're following the Atreides family as they prepare to leave their home on Caladan for Arrakis. All right. Well, so this is the Doctors Who Read Stuff. My name is Chris.
I'm Chip.
And I'm Brian.
We have with us John, that's you.
John Burkholm.
Cool. So John is joining us, a fan of Dune, and also brother to so. Chip.
Yes,
sadly.
No,
of course. No, yes. Of course.
He's the good looking.
This is going to be an awkward Christmas.
Or better looking brother.
You ever seen the movie Twins? No.
It's exactly like that.
It might, it's going to be a COVID Christmas anyway.
So we will keep sibling rivalry to a minimum. There will not be any fighting. I'm kidding. I don't know.
That might be good for ratings.
Well, I think I'm the one that invited him because he's a huge fan of the book and the movies, and has just read these things many more times than I have. So I thought he would probably have some good thoughts to share.
But yeah,
and I thank you for that,
John. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks
before we get into the meat. Once again, we want to call out Nick Imerman Design Company for providing our logo and all our graphics work. You can find him at nimerman.com or at nimerman_design on Instagram. All right.
Cool.
So, gentlemen, today is really, it's a lot of world building, it's a lot of lore, and it's a lot of relationship building, right?
And I think when we were kind of talking before we started recording, John had mentioned, this is a lot of the circle of people around Paul who are really shaping him into becoming what he is, through different training and different influences. So
definitely. And
it's also showing his connections to them. So as we reach Arrakis and the threats really become more apparent, their training kicks in, but also those bonds are tested.
Mm.
Yeah, and what I really kind of enjoyed here was it was a lot of, like I said, world building. It was a lot of exposition. There are, there were times I think where we've read books and it's been very exposition heavy, and I'm like, okay, it's too much. I'm out. This I thought was really well done.
Yeah. I've always thought these books read really smooth to where you can put them down, for a couple of days and you pick them back up and you're right back into it. It doesn't feel like it's a chore or a slog to get through some of these sections. So I feel like it's not poetic, but it's such a smooth read that, there's not a lot of extraneous stuff. That everything that I think Herbert puts into it it may not be important right this moment, but it will be at some point later in the book or in the series of books.
And the feeling too that you're actually being introduced to real characters. This is not a start from the beginning. You can tell that there was something before this. There are other things going on during this novel, and you know that there are going to be separate things coming. So it's weaving a very smooth story into an otherwise complete universe.
Right.
Yeah. I like that.
And one of the things to me that's really apparent as we're going through these three sections of the book is how fascinated and interested Paul is with Arrakis, with the sands, the worms, the Fremen.
The Fremen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, I think it's interesting that Paul knows about the myths of the Fremen and their Messiah and how he fits into that, but he has yet to believe, or think that it's him. He just thinks that it's a myth, but he wants to know because obviously it's going to be very important later.
I think it's interesting how much of that stuff that Herbert sets up now, so early in the book. I mean, we're not even 100 pages into the first book, and he's already laid out that Paul's the Messiah, that Yueh's the traitor, that all this stuff is going on, and that the Bene Gesserit has been feeding these myths to, the Fremen for I don't know how long. But that, everything's kind of heading to this big, move to Arrakis, and where I think stuff's going to start happening. Well, I know it is, but Brian doesn't know that yet.
Right.
Nope.
Well, whole first part of the book is all it's there's no secrets. It's like this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Don't wish for a happy ending because we've told you from page one it's not there.
And I don't know if that has to go back as to the time that it was written in the 60s, when sci-fi books, this was a huge book for a sci-fi book at the time that everything else, all of Asimov's old works and Heinlein and stuff, they were all maybe 150, 200 pages. They weren't big tomes. And I think this one came in around, 500 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
I don't know if it was just a difference in, in the time that it was written. But
I think the first few chapters weren't they printed in like Analog or one of those sci-fi magazines? So
I
he
think,
might have had
I
to
think,
do that.
yeah. I think quite a few of the chapters were, and then they compile it all. I think we talked about in the very first episode on this when we were talking about the book, before it was published, that it was that. But
yeah, it was piecemeal together, and then they made it into this. Yeah.
Another thing that kind of stuck out to me is they keep going back to the water. Water is precious there.
Uh-huh.
There was something, if I can find it here, that Paul recalled the Reverend Mother saying, if I can find it. It is on my copy. It is on page 29. You'll learn about the funeral plains, she said, about the wilderness that is empty, the wastelands where nothing lives except the spice and the sandworms. You'll stain your eye pits to reduce the sun glare. Shelter will mean a hollow out of the wind and hidden from view. You'll ride upon your own 2 feet without thopter, nor ground car or mount. So this strikes me as almost, I'm not going to say prophecy, but it's like she's foretelling things that have yet to happen. And it to me, it's kind of like, you read about, like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to draw an analogy to Wheel of Time because it's easy, because the Aes Sedai and the Bene Gesserit are clearly
related.
Clearly
Yeah.
the same type of organization. And you read, like, the prophecies of the dragon, and in the first book they don't mean much, but you get down the line and you're like, oh, that's what that means. So that's what this feels like to me.
And I also think they're setting up that Caladan and everybody on Caladan feels soft.
Yeah.
And as you get to Dune, they have to become hard emotionally and physically.
And it's funny when you say that, but when they start talking about all the Harkonnen traps, and Leto's very confident that we're ready for this. We know what we're getting into. We know that the Harkonnens are going to leave traps for us. We know all this stuff is coming. Yet, even when they get there, they're still not ready for what it is truly.
Yeah, it's and it's just amazing to me that this is how they frame the book. It's like they're walking into a trap. Yueh's the traitor. The Harkonnens and the Padishah Emperor are behind it. It's like they're just like, here's everything that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm still just like kind of mind blown by that.
But it's still gripping, and it's still, a page turner that even though that stuff, it's still Paul's story, but it's Jessica's story as much as it is Paul's. But
it's what's going to come after that. Like, it's like, well, what's going to happen then?
That's what sets everything in motion.
I think, that's a lot of stuff happens pretty quickly here coming up once they get onto Arrakis. And it's what happens after that.
So one thing that I thought was really kind of cool was the shield practice scene. It's like, they have these shields, and if you do fast attacks, you can't pierce the shield, but like a slow attack will allow you to pierce the shield.
The slow blade penetrates the shield.
But it's that piece of technology is just kind of fascinating to me. And even when they have them activated, Paul makes the observation, well, the air gets stale in there and things like that. So I mean, even though it's a piece of science fiction technology, there's still this element of reality to it. It's like there are consequences to using this. So
I also think the shield's interesting. And I know you guys were talking about like historical context, how the Atreides learned to fight using shields and their tactics. They won't work on Dune, just like how American tactics, when we get bogged down into Vietnam and other conflicts, our old tactics don't work. So it's I found that kind of train of thought of Herbert's was very interesting as well.
Yeah.
Just another layer to his
Yeah.
writing.
And I don't know if he meant that, but that's kind of, you can take that now in
Yeah.
hindsight.
Yeah. Now, when he's meeting with Dr. Yueh, we start to get more of just kind of like a view inside his mind, and we figure out that the conditioning, the imperial conditioning, was broken because his wife was taken by the Harkonnens.
Yeah.
But they don't really tell you a lot about imperial conditioning or what that means.
Mm-mm.
So, I mean, it's probably one of those building blocks that,
They don't really touch on it. It's like an extreme Hippocratic oath or something along those
Yeah.
lines.
And if you've undergone it, then you're basically cleared to
You-
directly serve or administer to the emperor, I believe, right?
right. That's when you get the
Yeah.
tattoo on
Yeah.
the diamond
Oh,
tattoo. Yeah. So that means that you've earned the rank that you could work with Shaddam the Fourth if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we pop over to a still from A, the upcoming movie, and B, David Lynch's 1986 movie, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure in the last episode I was saying it was 1985, so I think I was incorrect there, but
It's 84, isn't it?
It was filmed in 85,
okay.
and then I think it released in 86 because there was a
No,
whole.
it
They
was 80
re-edited it, didn't they? And that's why
I
it
think-
became.
I think it was 84 because we still lived in West Des Moines. I saw it at River Hills Theater downtown.
I know I was with you.
Anyway,
But we lived
I was
We lived-
going.
anyway,
but we lived in Indiana in 86.
And Sting was magnificent.
Oh yeah.
yes,
Fade.
but
Fade Rauku.
it seems like every person he comes into contact with, whether it's Thufir, whether it's Gurney, whether it's Dr. Yueh, it's like different perspectives on the same topics. So like Yui's talking about the Fremen and why their eyes are blue. It's linked to the saturation of the blood with the melange, and talking about the worms and how a small specimen is 110 meters long and 22 meters in diameter, but there have been worms up to 400 meters recorded, and it's
In the deep
speculated
desert.
that there could be some up to 700 meters. So every person he's meeting with and talking with and having a dialogue with, you're getting fed more information from these different viewpoints, which...
And I thought it was interesting, and I kind of forgot this because it's been quite a few years since I read it. They're talking about Gurney, and he'd spent time in the Emperor's prison planet. That was it,
Gedi
Salusa
Prawn.
Secundus.
Oh, Salusa Secundus. Yeah.
Yeah, but then they also Herbert then mentions that that's where the Sardaukar
Right.
trained, or that he basically calls those ranks to pull
Yeah.
future Sardaukar warriors from Salusa Secundus.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
that was interesting, and it's something I didn't recall from my previous meetings, and I came across that, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
It
yeah.
becomes very important later
Yeah.
because of the inhospitality of that planet
lends
compared to
itself
Arrakis.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last meeting Paul has before we leave is with his father, Duke Leto.
Leto.
Right?
Yeah. This is the first time we've
It
seen the
is.
Duke in the
It
book,
is.
right?
And
Yes.
as we said last time in the upcoming movie, it is Oscar Isaac Poe Dameron, very grizzled and graying Poe Dameron.
Yeah. Well, and then Leto, the Atreides name comes from a Greek play, Greek tragedy, and it's fitting for Leto because it's just foreshadowed that it's not going to end well for him.
Mhm.
Brian, was that a shock to you that he just said the Duke's gonna die?
No, we kind of get that feeling right away that it was
Thanks.
the Baron trying to move in on the Duke. Like it all feels like it's just going to be a big downhill
Yeah.
moment where you're going to get all this momentum, and then someone and a whole bunch of people are just going to die.
Right. Yeah. And the last thing that kind of happens before this section closes is that the Duke reveals to Paul that he has the capability to become a Mentat. And I don't think when we talked about Thufir we discussed what a Mentat was. We might have covered it in the
We
last
touched on
episode.
it briefly.
I think we did because we talked about the Butlerian
Yes,
jihad and the kind of
AI.
the getting rid of the machines, and that they
Mhm.
develop these human computers, which are the Mentats.
Well, they create the Bene Gesserit, the Guild, and the
Mhm.
Mentats
Yep.
to fill that
Right.
vacancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's kind of interesting to me because we've already he's already established a pretty interesting and a pretty riveting line, like storyline or a plot coming in here. And then all of a sudden he's like, and we're just going to pop this on top of it too, which is like, oh,
hmm
So he's
oh,
got the mind capable of being a
yeah,
human computer, but he's also got the Bene Gesserit
yep,
training. Now we're going to move to Arrakis, where the spice is going to be introduced into his
And
daily regimen and
yeah,
and he has
and the
all the
Fremen.
combat training from Duncan
hmm
and Gurney.
Gurney, yeah.
So he's almost like the perfect
He's a
leader.
perfect weapon. Is he a lethal
Well,
Yes,
weapon?
he's a lethal weapon.
yes,
Mhm.
and in any other story, I'd be like, oh, it's this is not just coincidence that all this is happening, but it's actually built into the story that this is all like intentionally planned
And
and
it's
it's
foretold
foretold.
that,
It's the whole fight of the Kwisatz
Yeah,
Haderach,
yeah,
and what Jessica did. Did she do the right
right.
thing or the wrong thing?
yeah. I'd forgotten, and I can't remember where it was mentioned early on, that she actually did bear the Duke a daughter, but she died at some point, right?
Hmm.
Wasn't that?
Uh,
I don't recall that, but it's
I don't recall that.
possible I
And
missed it. But
I'd have to look. Maybe I thought I read that he had a sister that had died at some point, and then she bore Paul.
Yeah.
But
she
yeah,
chose
maybe
to
not.
bore Paul. Like
Yeah,
that was the
I
yeah.
thought she changed him in utero from
I can't
because
remember.
Bene Gesserits can do
Mm,
that apparently.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
I'll
Yeah,
look
Interesting.
it
like
up. But
during
yeah,
the conception, she changed her plans.
Hmm.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Is that why you have two daughters now?
no, that's just blind luck, Chip.
So before we close this out, is there anything else we want to touch on before we move to Arrakis? I'm going to take the silence as no, and I think we're going to stop by saying for the next episode, we are going to be reading the next 3 sections. So those are the sections where they arrive on Arrakis. The first section is with Jessica. The second section is with, I think it's Jessica and Dr. Yueh, and then it closes out with Paul and the Hunter Seeker. So if you're following along with us, please utilize the comments. We would love to have some discussion happening there. If you like this, please like this and subscribe to this. And we will come back at you next week with the next section in Dune by Frank Herbert. John, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you
Thank you.
next time as well.
All right.
All right.
Until then,
Cool.
allons-y.